Welcome everyone to our intro to tracking. It's said that when we come out here to these wild places that we exit the human realm. We exit human time and we come into what's called ancestral time. And it's a kind of time that speeds up and slows down in relation to our space of presence within place, with our sense of curiosity and play. Slows and speeds up in relation to our attentiveness and to the lessons that we are ready and able to receive. Tracking is where my passions are. And the reason why I'm so passionate about tracking is because it is through tracking that we gain entrance into the living stories of a place. We gain a sense of inclusion with the happenings of our sacred relatives, of the deer and raccoon, coyote, lion, the birds. And in this, we see their relationship of how they're engaging and interacting with each other. And it's what, for me, allows the landscape to truly come alive and become four-dimensional. And it's through the tracks. And anymore, I can't help but notice tracks and animal signs. Even if I'm in a human dwelling or a building or a mall, I'm seeing tracks and signs. And that is indicating all that's happening that most humans are completely oblivious to. So in this video, we're going to just sink in a little bit and feel into how do we begin to identify tracks and what are we specifically looking for that will cue us in to which kind of animal we may be feeling into. All right. So basically, what tracking is pattern recognition. We're pattern detectives. We're searching out the patterns within the tracks, and we're searching out the patterns within how it moves through the landscape. We're searching in patterns of where like plants may be nibbled off, patterns in the sounds of the birds. Once you enter the tracker's mind, you find that you are never not tracking. And that's when life really opens up to all these beautiful textural layers that we never knew were available all around us. All right. So let's kind of look into about tracks. So the very first part is like, well, who are we following? Who are we trying to feel into? As you can see from this diagram, there's a lot of different kinds of tracks out there. And maybe you're also here seeing how there's some similarities within these tracks. You can see how at the very top left corner here, we see there's the cat. And next to that is the leopard. All right, now you go back to the cat, you go right below that, you see coyote. And we see that they both have 4 toes. We see they both have a pad. We see that coyote has some claws. You see that coyote print is slightly different than the cat print. Now, if you go to where coyote is, and you go across to where the rooster is, that's a very common print for a bird. Go all the way to the very far right, and there's crow. You go right next to crow on the left side, you have possum. Now you see where possum begins to have fingers. Right? Now if you go back to coyote and you go down one, you see the impala. Right? Now we're going into the hoofed animals. I wonder which way impala is moving. Right? So here you're starting to see some general commonalities, the similarities of like, oh, is it a bird? Might it be a cat? Might it be a canine? I suddenly smell skunk here. See, even with smell, we are tracking. Hopefully he doesn't come out for us. That'd be a funny video for you though. It does. So what are we looking for in tracks? What are the actual patterns? All right, so here we are, we got a couple of different things, right? One, we're looking for claw marks. We're looking for toe pads. Right? If it's a toed animal, we want to know how many toes does it have. Here we see that both cats, the feline, and the canine, the dogs, they both have 4 toes. Now when you look at like bears, they actually have 5. When you look at raccoons, they have 5, right? So how many toes it has begins to tell you what kind of mammal it's going to have. The next thing you're looking at, can you see its claws? Because you see with most felines, most cats, you can't see their claws. And the reason why that is because they have these retractable claws. They can retract them in. And so they only use them when they're actually pouncing on prey or they need that extra traction. Whereas canines, they're always using those claws. Right? They're in a more type of movement where they need those claws. Now you go all the way to the far right, you see there's the webbed bird. So those lines there indicate webbing. So we know that this is a water type bird. But there's also mammals with webbing, such as otters and beaver. And so those create another indication. If it's a mammal type print with webbing, it starts to help you narrow down who it might be. Let's take a look at some other patterns to look at. So here we see that the canine, we see that it's a longer print than the cat print. We often see the canine print has a bit of a diagonal or a diamond type shape. Okay. Now you'll notice there's a difference between like coyote prints and domestic dog prints. And domestic dog prints will normally be a bit wider. They're a little more relaxed and soft because they're not constantly using them like a wild animal does. So here we see the canine is going to be longer than a feline. It's longer than it is wide, whereas the feline is about as wide as it is long. So those are some other indications. Now, another thing to look at here is we can see how the toes of the canine, they're a little bit longer. They're more elongated, whereas the feline, they have a little more, they're just these little circles, right? They're more circular. So those are some other things to begin to feel into. Some types of the patterns we're beginning to discern. There's those again. Now let's look at some actual prints. So this is a track of a coyote. Top right, there's the coyote pad. To the left is the actual print of coyote in the sand. And these ridges that actually make the actual track itself, that's where the sand is coming up between the pad and the toes. Now, something very specific about canines is that they have this tendency to make an X with these type of ridges. So we go to the next slide here, and we see that X. So if we look at the bottom left, that ridge that goes between the toe and the heel pad goes straight up through and up to the ridge between the 2 toes up on the right-hand side. Same if you go to the bottom right, where there's the ridge of sand between the right toe and the bottom pad, moves up through, and it has this kind of like snaky type of S, where it moves back up through the toes. And so here you see there's that X. So typically, if you can see an X mark in the prints, it may most likely indicate it is a type of canine. And again, you can also see there's a little bit of that diamond shape to the prints. In the sand, you can see a little bit of the claw marks that are right up in there. And so that's a canine print. Now we'll go back to a cat print. This is a mountain lion. So again, up top right, that's its pad. And you can see where its heel pad actually has like these 3 different humps. Now you go back to the canine, and it only has 2 humps on the very bottom of the pad. Go to the cougar, and it has 3 humps. See, that's something else to look at. Here you could also see the pad is also a bit longer. It's almost like a diamond shape, like a pyramid. For this one, it's just kind of wobbly and funky looking, all right? So here you can see where you can't see any claw marks. And again, look at the toes, how circle they are, circular. Whereas these toes, they're much more elongated. So you can also see a little bit of the relationship as like how far in between, the sand, these ridges are between these toes. So these are all little indicators of whether it's going to be canine or feline. Now we go to another type of animal, and we see this is a deer. Right? Now those are the tracks. Now which direction do you think deer is heading in? Is it heading up the screen, or is it going to be heading down the screen? If we look at the tracks in the top right picture, right, of the actual hoofs, we see how it has this kind of swooping to the outside of the track. And if we go to the black and white picture, you can see that swooping to the outside creates these like teardrop type shapes. So the hoof is actually like these two pieces of the foot, right? One on the left, one on the right. And you can see that the point is actually what's moving up the screen. It's almost like a ship, like a boat, right? So the boat, you want the point of the boat cutting through the water instead of the flat of the boat, which would be like really trying to push through rather than slice through the water. So here, the heels or the hooves of deer follow the same type of principle. So here we see that the deer hooves are moving up the screen. Boom. Now we're going to look at one more animal that's very unique. That's raccoon. I love raccoons. I call them our Pacific Northwest monkey. And you can see how they have the 5 fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're dexterous, just like us humans, just like monkeys are, and they're able to actually hold on to things. And if you look to the right picture there in the sand, the far left one, that's its front, right? And the back one, the one on the right, that's its back foot. So now we see that raccoons, their back feet are longer than their front. And we're going to go into gaits and how they actually move here in another video. But this is another way of beginning to create that discernment. So here in the picture, with both the front and the back, you can see where the pad is, and you can see where its toes are. And you can see that it both has 5 toes on each of its hands. And you can see the tiny claw marks right at the very edge of the sand there. All right. Okay. And so that is our basics intro to tracking, recognizing patterns, what kind of patterns you are looking for. You notice you're looking for the heel, how many toes or fingers it might have. Can you see the claws, right? And then being able to discern which direction the animal may be moving in. So with that, we will be going into how to identify the gait of an animal. And once you start to recognize the gait, like which is how it moves through the landscape, that's where the stories really come alive. All right. See you guys there.